Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for Bitcoin and Web3. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy in our unique industry. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in the space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Hi, everyone. Today I am joined by Aubrey Strobel, who is a communications advisor to Trust Machines and the host of the Observation podcast, sponsored by Cash App, and an author and speaker in the Bitcoin space. So excited to have you. Welcome, Aubrey.
Thanks, Kelley, for having me on the show. It's been a long time coming, it feels like.
It has. You have such an amazing background in marketing, PR, communications. So I'm super excited to dive in. But will you please kick us off by telling the audience a little bit more about you and your background?
Yeah. So like you, I've been in this space for, it feels like a very long time. I was, crypto was like the first job I ever had. I was working in PR at an agency in New York. And this is 2017. So this is like prior to full bull runs ago, where it was a very different space. Like the top, 10 coin market cap was totally different, looks totally different than it is today. People were working on totally different projects. So I was working at agency side. I eventually left the agency and moved in-house and did communications for a company called Lolly, which is the largest Bitcoin rewards application for people earning Bitcoin back on their purchases. And so I led pretty much all the comm, social marketing for Lolly. And kind of that's my big kind of claim to fame in so many ways, because people were like, who's running this account? It was very humorous, silly, and it kind of took off in this space, especially in the Bitcoin space. It was just had a very fun vibe to it. And yeah, grew Lolly, and then kind of hit a point where I had built such a large personal brand on my own and really loved still, working in this space, but wanted to expand out. And I launched a podcast called The Observation, which is sponsored by Cash App. And I'm also an advisor still to Lolly, but also other projects. So a company called Trust Machines, which is building the largest ecosystem of Bitcoin applications. So things that are looking at L2s on Bitcoin and what we can do there. So I'm a communications advisor there as well. So yeah, it's been 7 years and it's been really great.
I can't believe that 2017 is 7 years ago now. That's nuts.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on it. Yeah.
You have worn so many different hats in this industry and done so many different things. What are some of your favorite aspects of working in the industry? One of my favorite things to do is I built also, while I was building the Lolly Twitter, I built up my own personal Twitter as well to, very comical, but making points that I think are interesting about or observations about the industry. And so I really like writing op-eds in this space, long form articles where you can dig a layer deeper. And I'm actually a contributor for CoinDesk. So I write, from time to time, some op-eds and really go deeper into subjects. I think in in Twitter, you can write threads. You can put a short little quippy tweet up there that can be punchy and powerful. But I really actually enjoy writing a lot. And maybe that's why that podcasting was sort of a natural transition, because it was the verbal kind of, way of creating op-ed form that people could listen to, because everyone learns differently. So I've really enjoyed doing that. And actually a lot of the cool speaking opportunities kind of around the world. I have a joke that the sun never sets on a crypto conference, because it's just one always, somewhere in the world, there's some sort of conference happening. So I've enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, I really like to write. I've been so impressed by that. And not only are you a fantastic writer, you catch topics in real time and then write amazing long form content. And I see it published days later. How do you execute that? And do you have the distribution relationships with the op-ed editors already, where you just pitch the idea and get it placed? Or how does that all happen?
Yeah. For example, I just wrote one on Barbie, which was kind of more one of the more funny, comical ones. I was just trying to make a point, but I had that idea overnight because I was Michael Saylor and other people had put out this tweet that was Bitcoin is Ken energy. And I was okay, but Barbie was one of the first, and obviously this is hypothetical, humor me, it was she was one of the first leaders in STEM. She was an astronaut. She was an engineer. She was doing all this stuff. I was Barbie definitely would have liked Bitcoin. Let's write about that and why that is. Barbie was created before, women had equitable access to their own like bank account. So it was interesting to kind of like talk about that. But that said, I've also talked about like the art of scarcity in terms of NFTs and Bitcoin and what value represents. I've written articles on the Navajo reservation and sort of like how people are disenfranchised in different parts of the world, so financially. So it kind of hits different topics. And honestly, it's just like I find some inspiration. I pitch the editor. I've made such great contacts in this space, with a lot of op-ed editors. And I can usually get, like, I wrote that Barbie op-ed in the night and he's like, I love this. We're writing it in the morning. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Like, I didn't even edit it yet. Like, it's like kind of in its rough stages, but it went up. So it's fun to be able to sort of establish and have, these connections that we've both built in this space and being able to like reach out to someone and get it like turned over within a few hours, which is really cool.
I couldn't believe the timeline on that. Like, not only I loved that piece, everyone should go read it. So cute. But also like couldn't believe how fast it was too, because it was timely. Like it was obvious that you had done that quickly. So yeah, kudos. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that you touched about, you built out, we were always so impressed with Lolly's Twitter presence. I mean, you really made it fun, lighthearted, and people were drawn to it. And so I think, you organically grew those followers, but then you also mentioned how you simultaneously grew your own personal brand on Twitter. I'm curious, like, what the differences were with if there was a strategy or if that just kind of happened organically, how you recommend people navigate that. And then, like, it sounds like there were multiple benefits to both of those vehicles being sort of received well by the community, I guess.
Yeah, it was an interesting time when the Lolly Twitter came to be because there wasn't a lot of personality, I think, on the crypto side. Crypto was trying to appeal to very institutional people. It wasn't trying. It was almost not having as much fun as it eventually came to be. So when I was building the Lolly Twitter, it was just something of like, what would a company account look like that I would want to follow? And a lot of that I actually do think. This is even before like meme stocks took off. I mean, it's like 2018, 2019. And so there's a lot of like memology, if this like makes sense, that really helped grow and that businesses weren't really leveraging. And so getting people to like care about a company account, especially like Bitcoin rewards, it's exciting, but like, how do you really make something exciting? There's like humor. There's all these other things that you can play off of, but while talking about trending topics. And I think if you can sort of marry the two and give a brand a distinct voice, so it almost feels like that brand is a person. And I know that's not always the case for every brand. Not every brand can run their account like the Wendy's account. It's not quite like that. But if you can find something unique that you have to say and people resonate with it, you automatically can start growing what I'd like to say is like a cult or like a group of people that just love your product because it makes them feel good when they interact with it. So that's all I was trying to do with the Lolly account. And it was able to grow, very successfully. With my personal account as well, I think talking about, a lot of the stuff that we go, that people don't see, or like even writing a thread about how you grow up a great company social handle is something that gives you credibility. I think it's so important to really talk about what you're doing on Twitter all the time. And I give this advice to a lot of college grads. I always say, like, people don't know what you're doing all the time. There's no idea for people to know, like, I know what Kelley does every single day. Like, this is what her day-to-day looks like. This is how Kelley thinks. Your Twitter really can be your resume. And if you show people, like, I wrote this article, this is how I think. I placed this. We had this successful launch. Like, taking credit for these moments that happen, because people will remember that and they go, who should I think of for this job? Who did a great job at creating a voice for a company account? Oh, Aubrey Strobel did this one thing, or Kelley's so great. She placed, 3 articles, mainstream hits for her client. Like, we should go with Kelley, So it's these things that Twitter very much is show and tell. And some people aren't comfortable with that. Like, I think I grew into doing that more often. And honestly, I think it's the way that you can actually get yourself jobs, get yourself freelancing work, get yourself higher pay raises when you're really valued member of the entire community. So that was something that I just planned on doing myself. I know LinkedIn is a great, like networking tool that people use, but I just think in crypto, people live on crypto Twitter. That is where they're at. And you kind of have to meet them there. That's everyone. So that's sort of how it happened. And thankfully that strategy worked out.
I mean, that is such good advice. I'm going to take that to heart and actually implement it more myself, because you're so right. Like, it's such a great opportunity, and yeah, such good advice.
It's just hard though, because like it does become its own job in a sense. And so I get why people are like, oh my gosh. And then I have to work a full day and then I have to post it to Twitter. So it definitely it is time consuming, but I do think even if you can get out like one tweet a day of something, or even just put your opinions or insights on whatever's trending today, it's still collectively adding value over time for your career, anyone's career, not just you. I'm saying you generally.
Yeah. No, and it's so easy to work so hard to land the wins, especially if it's like on a client or someone else's behalf, and then to not take the time to publicly celebrate them or to kind of take the credit, especially. And sometimes that's hard when it's like a team effort. And so you don't want to be like, oh, I did this or whatever. But
even saying we did this, like you're still showing leadership by putting out like, we got these wins. I'm very proud of my team. It's just so good to do those things. And I just don't think LinkedIn had like the ROI for me. I mean, I still will post there occasionally. And people argue this right now. People are saying the conversion engagement rate on LinkedIn right now is higher than Twitter, because X is going through a lot of like algorithmic changes. So people are saying it's kind of like they're feeling dead on Twitter right now, that there's not a lot of engagement, which is, I would say, possibly true. And that LinkedIn is a place. I just think in this industry specifically, like this is advice for people in the crypto space, Web3 space. I would say Twitter, you just got to be posting there if you want to help grow your personal brand.
Yeah. And as it relates to, I mean, Lolly was unique in the sense that a lot of crypto companies are not targeting consumers in the way that Lolly was. Do you think that your advice rings true for businesses that are like B2B, or a lot of the businesses that we work with are targeting developers and, really trying to attract that audience?
Well, most projects need users or testers or anything, like at least, if they've come out of like their beta phase or, wherever. It depends, because there's so many different projects. So it's hard to compare. A lot of projects try to build community and then a product, or which is kind of interesting even before launch. So it really depends, because everyone's needs are so different. But I think what everyone is looking for is attention in 2023. Like the attention across all platforms is, you can see like Elon is paying out creators to make better content on here. And then there's the TikTok creator fund where people are getting paid out, and the checks are larger for longer form content, which means they want more time spent on TikTok. So if you're creating a 10-minute video and people are watching all the way to the end of it, that's very valuable for TikTok. And so what you see is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter now trying to integrate video in a way to just get people's attention. And so that's not going to slow down or going to change anytime soon. That said, like getting people to pay attention to your product, whatever you're, advertising or selling, is just going to be even harder. So it's going to get more competitive over time, and really making yourself stand out in that way is going to require like a more robust strategy. I don't know if the Lolly strategy would totally have played today, just because so many companies have kind of figured out that like personification of a social media account in so many ways. So yeah, it's interesting, because as much as the algorithms change and the social platforms change, it almost calls for a different strategy now.
Interesting. Yeah. What about in terms of LinkedIn? I heard recently that like, because there aren't as many people posting photo and video content there, that type of content does well on that platform. Have you played around with that?
I would agree. I do think because LinkedIn has gotten like kind of decreased, it's like people aren't really quite using it as much as they used to be. It's boosting or promoting to encourage engagement on the platform. Now, Threads launched, I guess, middle of the summer. Maybe it's been 2 months now. And there was a huge, boom for people to come in, and people were posting, but that's kind of dropped off significantly. And so, you're going to find that these platforms are going to try to find other ways to incentivize people to go there. Will Threads make it? I don't know. LinkedIn's here to stay. I just, I think it really depends per industry. And yeah, if there's an opportunity to kind of seize that engagement on LinkedIn, post anyway. Like my good friend, Dan Held, he is like a LinkedIn king. He's hacked it. He posts every day. And really, he's not doing much different than taking his tweet and putting it on LinkedIn. Most of the time, his content is like applicable to both sites. So it it's like, if you're already doing the work, just post it over there anyway and forget it. If it works out, it works out. LinkedIn's kind of like, experimental at this point, even though it's been around so many years.
Yeah, totally. The other thing that you did at Lolly, which was so impressive, was you launched Lolly TV. What was sort of the inspo behind that, and how did that do, and what platforms did that sort of live on and all that?
Yeah, Lolly TV was sort of something that came out of, I guess it was still COVID, in the middle of the COVID times, of kind of just creating a way to communicate with people when they were at home, with like a breaking news rundown and then like a meme of the week and like the best deals that you could get on Lolly. So it was a way to like sell a lot of our merchants on there and let people know, like, you can get 7% back at Chewy, or you can do, whatever that may be. And also we gave away Bitcoin on the channel. So it was just like all sorts of entertainment that we were like putting out, and I would just do it every week. And it really grew quite significantly. We even had like sort of Zoom meetups where people could come in and talk and like ask questions. It's just unheard of for like a Bitcoin app, that people were so excited to share, like, I stacked this much this week, and like we gave out, rewards to people. And it's like, it's fun Lolly was a fun product. Its name is Lolly. It was like a lollipop. We were like giving rewards away like candy. It was like a candy land of sorts that people were really excited about. So Lolly TV was on YouTube. We didn't put it on other channels. We were really trying to grow up YouTube, because YouTube at the time was actually one of the better platforms to get on. This is like, TikTok wasn't quite totally built out yet. And we didn't really know too on like paid what you could do on TikTok. In the early days of TikTok, they were kind of banning Bitcoin, crypto. Anytime you would say that, you'd get like dinged, I guess, by the algorithm. So YouTube was a little bit more friendly. And so we just posted it there, and it grew quite a bit. And then I had to leave it eventually, so it's no longer running, but it was a fun, good test for like what I would want to do in a podcast in the future. So definitely like a fun little thing for our users for a bit.
Speaking of the observation, that originated, I think the idea was like a fleeting thought that you had and you tweeted about it, right? And then it caught wind. Was it because you posted it out in the universe on Twitter that it came to life, or like what was sort of the journey there?
Yeah, the observation's so funny, because I had the idea of doing the podcast, and one day a friend told me, I think I have a name for your podcast. And I was like, The Observation. I was like, oh my God, it's so good. That's such a good name. I got to go get the handles now. I'm going to go do that. And I think I tweeted it out there, and I really believe this. If you write down your goals, or even tweet out your goals, which is better because there's an actual timestamp, you can even scribe your goals and put them on chain. I don't know, whatever you want to do. I think it really creates just, it kind of manifests itself, that you put it out into the world. And so, yeah, I actually created the handle and tweeted out, and the account grew a few thousand followers within like a few months. So I was like, oh, there's like a market here to like do a podcast. So that's kind of how it came to be. And then it took a while to kind of sort of figure out, going off on your own after doing agency and then in-house is a little daunting. And so I, just wanted to make sure that's what I wanted to do full time, and starting to create content and create things that I, would choose to create. So, then the observation came to be. There was never really another name for it after that. It was like AUB, observation. Spelling it out for people if you're like listening verbally and you're like, where's the brilliant Aubrey observation is the plug.
That resonates so much with me. I mean, I don't consider myself to be a woo-woo person, but I am very much a manifester. Like much of my life is manifested from writing things down. But I love your idea of like scribing it or tweeting about it. And then you can literally refer back to it many years later and say, look this was my dream for myself. And
I just love that Twitter's kind of like a diary. Like I can go find tweets from myself from like 2012 or 20. And I'm like, this was so silly. Or like, I thought this or whatever. But it's fun to have, like, you can see your dreams, or one day I'm going to be doing this. One day I'm going to be doing this. Like I think I tweeted like, one day I'm going to write a book. I'm sure that'll happen down the road one day, but it's just cool to have like a living journal of your thoughts. Personally, I've always been too online, but
I think a lot of people feel a fear of putting themselves out there in the first place. And so in the public, has that ever been something that you've encountered? And also, crypto Twitter can be a bit of a scary place too, because there are so many opinions. And how do you navigate that?
I think I kind of came under fire. I had done something as a move at Lolly, actually, where I kind of had my first sort of mob that didn't really like, what I had put out there. It was sort of like this post after like the BLM thing, that happened. And really, I don't know if I would have still done this today, but we had put out like just, there's this meme that says like Bitcoin fixes this or something like that. And we were like, Bitcoin doesn't fix this. And it was just a simple statement that we put out. And they're like, fire your comms person. Like you shouldn't be getting involved in this, and it's not to say that, it's very hard to explain now. Like the climate of companies making public statements was very much that way. Now, because even like Brian Armstrong he put out that statement of like, we're just not getting involved in anything, period, anymore. I mean, his leadership style is controversial, but that I do think that in some ways putting out statements for everything can totally wear on a company. And I don't know if I would like totally advise that today, but I do think at the time I made the right decision of making a statement. I did make that statement, and I thought at the time it was very appropriate for the cultural climate that we were in, and it was the right side of history to kind of be on. And yeah, I had a storm of people that were like kind of attacking me and saying to fire me. And so like the spaces can be pretty toxic. And I've gotten in, there's parts where your personal life and your career, your job or whatever can kind of come into fire. And I think I learned early on that you really just need to mute threads. And if there's no issue there and people are just hating on you, you just need to mute the thread and move on. And if something really is important, like you'll find out about it, but like for your mental health, that's the best thing you can do. And I think it's hard sometimes to, you want to have like a personal side and you want to be able to share things about your life. And that totally didn't used to be the way that sort of corporations worked before COVID. Now that people work from home, there's a little bit more casualness and comfortability with how you are perceived online. I think employees are full people. They have many, sides to themselves besides just a job. And I really, it was hard for me to like feel comfortable being myself online and sharing other parts of my life that aren't just work. But I do think we've like kind of moved a little bit the Overton window as a society and allowed people to be just more than an employee at a company online and be just more themselves.
Yeah. And tensions were running high during that time of the example that you gave, so I feel like it was a no-win scenario for brands and individuals in a way, because everybody was just on edge. But also, this thing that you bring up about you're like a whole person, I find that different platforms are like, it's more comfortable to share different parts of your life, depending on.
Yeah. And there's levels of like safety too, right? I'm careful too, because I've had situations where I've maybe shared too much online and people have been able to figure out like where I live. I don't obviously have moved now, so I'm in a better spot, but you got to be super careful. And obviously this space is very focused on privacy. So always, acting according to being a little bit overcautious is kind of how I run my life now, because you just never know.
Yeah, definitely. And you can't control who follows and pays attention. So you recently launched a short film on Twitter, which I recommend everybody go check out, called Lecker Feeling. It's fantastic. Tell me more about the inspiration behind that. How did that all come to be?
Yeah. And thanks for sharing it, by the way, and retweeting it, because I really appreciate how much the community came and like really helped get the word out on Twitter. So appreciate that. Like a Feeling is a film that I'm so proud of. And I, worked with a really small team to create. The director, Alex, and then really, and I were the ones that making that. We had a few like kind of other hands in it, but it was just really a labor of love. And it's a story about hope, but it involves surfing and Bitcoin. And I went down to South Africa after I heard about a township, which is a sort of an area post-apartheid that still exists, where it's still segregated and, a little bit away from the land, like the main city area, that was integrating Bitcoin as a payment method. And there were surf instructors receiving Bitcoin as a full salary. And I thought this was fascinating. And I just wanted to know, like, how was this really playing out in a real world circumstance? We hear about Bitcoin as payments, as a hedge against inflation in places like South Africa, where the South African rand is inflated. It's like 17 rand to $1 US, and it's lost a lot of its purchasing power. over the past like 60 years. So it was interesting to go down there and kind of actually see what was happening. And in a situation like that, you really don't know what you're going into because no one really has gone down there and done a full dive on it and told the story in the way that we did. So that's sort of what the story is about. And it wasn't actually a plan to make it a short film. It could, we were like, could this be a vlog? Is this something that we could just do interviews there? We weren't quite sure. But what we immediately kind of came to know is that this is, incredibly powerful and we really needed to tell this story.
Love it. I mean, it's such a great story and you did such a beautiful job. I mean, you must have brought, and also the cinematography of it is so impressive. So how did you first hear about what was going on down there? And also, how did you sort of make that happen from did you fundraise before for this idea or you just went down because you were curious about it? How did that all happen?
Yeah, well, thank you again. Alexander Heil did the cinematography. He's the director. He did all those shots and he actually was the sole shooter. It was crazy too because he was doing a drone and then running another camera and just was able to come away with such beautiful shots. So highly recommend hiring him for anything that anyone needs. Secondly, how I found out about it was I was on Nostr, which is this decentralized social platform, and I told people I was considering going to South Africa, and I think it was Derek Ross, who is a Bitcoiner in the space. He was like, have you, heard of Bitcoin Akasi? And I looked at the website. There was not a lot of information. I basically DM'd the account, the Twitter account, again, back to Twitter and the power of Twitter. I DM'd the Bitcoin Akasi Twitter account. I was like, hey, heard you're integrating Bitcoin into a South African township. This sounds really interesting. I'd love to come down and just visit and see if there's something we could do here in terms of the story. And so thankfully, Herman, the founder of Bitcoin Akasi, was like, yeah, we'll come down and film, totally was fine with us doing that. And so I drove from Cape Town to Mossel Bay. And if you ever look on a map of how far that is, it's like a 4-hour drive on this garden route all the way to Mossel Bay. So, it was definitely a big risk. I self-funded it. It was just something that I felt needed to be done. And there's so many things that, we do in this space. I mean, crypto largely, but people are always making money off of so many different things. But where are the real human heartfelt stories? And where are we making a difference in the world? Where has this technology helped people? I would rather spend my time telling those stories than working on some project that's just some sort of gambling product. It's just not superficial. Some of this space can be really superficial. And after we saw, so much of the pain that people went through with FTX and many of the other exchanges that kind of imploded, you want to see something that shows that there is a lot of good happening by giving people keys to their own wallet and giving people the ability to invest in an asset for the first time in their entire lives. Bitcoin was the first thing that they ever invested in because they don't have a bank account, which means they can't make any investments. They can't even hold their money, just passively in a checking account. So yeah, it was something that needed to be shared, and just really glad that we were able to sort of get all this information, and so thankful to Bitcoin Akasi that everyone was so open to also sharing their story. That no one there had to share anything with us, and they were very open and welcoming and wanted to share what was happening and how Bitcoin was benefiting them. So it was really cool. The point of the film was to fundraise for Bitcoin Akasi, and I was like, okay, people come and tell and sort of get a camera there and leave and extract value, but I was like, what do you guys need? What do you need to keep this running, to keep kids taking surf lessons and keep going to these competitions and helping these kids make a name for themselves in sports surfing? What do you need to help get these kids away from these townships that have drugs and, all these different things that are bad, and get them away? And they're earning an allowance in Bitcoin as well. So it's they're investing in themselves. How do we make this better? How can we get more kids in the program? And they were like, we need a renovation for the surf center. And we were like, done. We'll get. I was like, how much do you need? And they were like $16,000 for the renovation, which is equivalent to 300,000 rand. And I was like, we should just do one Bitcoin. One Bitcoin for this community, and they just so that they can have a treasury and start to actually be able to not just go live day by day, check by check. By actually kind of having some funds. So I did the film premiere, and we said 1 Bitcoin, and we've raised 3 Bitcoin for this group and over $80,000. And shout out to all the people who donated. There was a lot of big people that came in and were super kind and donated a ton of money so that these kids can now have like a beautiful new place. And the amazing thing about this whole thing was the very next day after it got funded, I think it was funded in 48 hours, they were already working on the renovations. Like they were so excited and they were so thrilled. There were people in there the next day. It was like Christmas morning really for everybody there. And they've been kind of putting their pictures of the renovations online, which is actually a really cool way to use Twitter as well to kind of, people sometimes donate money to another country. And then you're like, okay, is it going anywhere? Are people doing it? And they were like, we're creating a log of every single thing that we're doing. And like every renovation, we got new sinks, we got new this, we've painted. And so it's been so beautiful to even everyone who donated can see that in real time. And it just really cool. I've never seen a fundraiser like that in my life. And I'm just the person that was a part of it. So it was really cool.
I mean, that goes back to the power of Bitcoin, really. The fact that they were able to receive the funds so quickly and start deploying them immediately. And the fact that, and then also the power of Twitter. I mean, you launched this thing on Twitter. You're seeing the improvements on Twitter in real time. I feel like you also, the kudos, by the way, to the, reception. That was kind of my follow-up question was about like, how did you got such high profile people amongst the Bitcoin community, but most largely on Twitter to, participate in funding this. And that probably goes back to the personal brand that you built. It all kind of comes full circle there.
It really does, and I've made such good friends with people over the years. So a lot of the people that I, reached out to and shared, it was all through growing my personal brand and growing these relationships, which are so strong in the space. So I was able to share it with people, and there was a lot of anonymous donations, but then a lot of like big donors, and it was all of the donations were important to making this, a success. And I think it's interesting, right? We kind of created this fundraiser and a film and a campaign that married this decentralization of like information, which was the internet, and the decentralization of finance, which is Bitcoin. And having that in real time, where before there were so many barriers, from us, like you couldn't really get a good grasp, even sometimes on the news, you couldn't really get a good feel of like what was actually happening on the ground. Without someone going there and filming it, but then putting it online so that now everybody knows. And so that's out there. But then also having people donate in the form of Bitcoin where they can get it within a few. I mean, if you donate via Lightning or USDC, they got it in seconds. If they donate via Bitcoin, it's like 10 minutes and they have the money, which just never would have been possible. If you think about like 20 years ago, you'd have to like do some Western Union wire and take so much of your money. And then, it just wouldn't have been possible. And then for it to turn around the next day and like them to renovate and already start working on it, just unbelievable, So it's just, we're speeding up as a society even, and we're more transparent than ever, right? Everything you can go on, like, besides Lightning, you can go look at like Block Explorer and look at every single transaction that's happening with those donations. It's all public, I'm not cussing it. It's going straight there to Bitcoin Akasi. Any of the other donations are just totally trackable. And then they're being transparent on the donations because they're just putting the pictures up of all the stuff that's happening. So it was just really beautiful to see kind of how much we've progressed on like multiple levels of all these different technologies working together, but also having so many people that know and how to use Bitcoin and be able to send it. So it was just, I just loved the entire experience. It was so great. It was amazing.
That's so cool. I feel like there's a follow-up potentially to see like how these renovations have come along and how it's all progressing like many years into the future. But it is so cool. You're right. It's like this crescendo moment of all of these things coming together to work to really improve life, and a story of hope in a time where this industry really needs one.
No, and I hope that's what it was. I think bringing people closer together and more connected, and even more connected with the community that is in South Africa. That is, there's a lot of people that are Bitcoiners down there as well. It's not just North America and Europe, or, sometimes we don't even really go down and explore these areas. So it's cool to have some representation. And now there's going to be some speakers, I think, at the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference from Bitcoin Akasi. So it's just really cool. It's just unifying, uniting, like bringing people more and more connected and more together and feeling like they have a voice and they're represented in our community. And so at least that's what I was trying to do with the film, is to show that there are people out there that we need to bring into the fold as well.
Well, thank you so much, Aubrey, for joining me today. You shared so much great advice for our audience. Are there any closing thoughts or resources or things you'd like to share with us before we wrap things up here?
Yeah. So if you haven't seen Luck of Feeling yet, it is on my YouTube channel, but I've also pinned it because I really like how Twitter is experimenting with long form content. It's native on my Twitter account. It's pinned at the top. It's 13 minutes long. Go watch it. It's definitely worth a watch. And then you can follow me at Aubrey Strobel. I'm on all social handles, like pretty much every platform at Aubrey Strobel, to just keep up with whatever I'm up to, what my next piece of content is going to be. So check me out there.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by Melrose PR, a leading provider of communications and PR strategy for Bitcoin and Web3 innovators. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.